Welcome back to Stop the Takes. I'm Austin. That is
I'm
Austin, and we
Austin,
are
brother.
live. We are live on YouTube. Um, yeah, my God, what a
You're
start!
rusty.
I'm rusty. Yeah, we had the hiatus. We came back, and it apparently wasn't enough. Um, but welcome in, everybody. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. We are going to be breaking down our thoughts on ESPN's all quarter century NFL team. So from 2000 to 2024, they basically made a team a roster of the best players at each position. We obviously have a lot of thoughts on that. For those that haven't seen it, we'll kind of talk through who was on that list. Um, but as we jump into this thing, what were your? We'll go position by position here, and we'll probably spend more time on some than others, just based on what we think they got right, what we think they didn't. But what was your first reaction to this when you saw it come out, Austin?
Well, for one, it was pretty cool that they did it. I'll give them credit for that. It was pretty neat concept. Didn't know it was happening, and really didn't see it around social media until our check the mic guys reacted to the list as well. Um, so I'll give them credit for making the list. The list itself has issues, as you kind of alluded to. However, it's overall a pretty solid list, I'll say. I think it's a solid list. Some positions are way more questionable than others. And there's definitely some solid debates, I'll say. But with lists like these, there's always going to be somebody who disagrees, obviously, because, they want their favorite player on there or whatever. And there's been a lot of good players in the this century so far. So, and you also have that debate of guys who like started their career in the 90s and like how much did they actually
Yep.
end up playing in the 2000s. And then you also have some of the younger fellas that made it as well that are somewhat debatable. So it's an interesting list, and I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, completely agree. It was definitely a cool idea. But you kind of touched. It's kind of weird that I feel like it just didn't get much traction. Like nobody really posted about this a ton. It's been out for over a week now. Um, but yeah, so without further ado, we will dive right in, starting with the quarterbacks. I think this one, in my opinion, there's two here that are non-debatable, but then the ending is where you get a little debatable. So the three quarterbacks, they pick three, and then they also have two practice squad guys. So the first quarterback is Tom Brady. I'm assuming they've done this in like a depth chart perspective. The
Yes.
second is Peyton Manning. The third is Patrick Mahomes, and then the practice squad is Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees.
So this one to me, the debate starts with the first two guys are obvious, right? Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, those are slam dunks, obvious names to put here. Might be the two greatest quarterbacks of all time. So obviously they're going to make the quarter century team of the century they played in. Um, so they're obvious. The question mark is, has Mahomes done enough to be the third guy over Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees? My take on it is that he has obvious, like it's
Mhm.
not obvious. There's a heavy debate, right? Because Mahomes has obviously only been in the league since 2017, has only played since 2018. Aaron Rodgers was a rookie in 2005. His entire career has basically went by in this quarter century. So he obviously has a really good debate for it. But to me, like, dude, just looking back on last season, if Mahomes had won that Super Bowl, I think people would have been debating whether he's the second best quarterback of all time already or not. And if you're going to have that debate, to me, okay, it's pretty obvious that he should be on a quarter century team when we're talking about him as a top five quarterback of all time.
Yeah, and I think recency bias is probably in a lot of people's brains when it comes to Mahomes. And I've seen interesting stats anyway. Like over the past couple seasons, he hasn't really played as like down to down. He's still Patrick Mahomes, but like stats wise and everything, hasn't been as flashy as when he first came on the scene. But from an accolade perspective, when measuring him up to Rodgers and Breeze, I mean, Breeze is an interesting one because he was so good, but never really. I mean, it brought New Orleans their first Super Bowl ever, but never won an MVP, which is kind of crazy. But Rodgers being a four-time MVP, won Super Bowl, the accolade question with him and Mahomes. I think recency bias probably hurt Rodgers on this,
Yeah,
making it in
the
over
Jets
Mahomes.
air.
The Jets, you go to the Jets and it's just like, buddy, no.
Yeah,
Actually, funnily enough, with running back, that may play a role with one of the guys. We realized that there's a theme. If you play
yeah.
for the Jets, you don't make the roster.
Yeah, very
Uh,
true. I think you're definitely right about that to a certain extent. Like, I think Aaron Rodgers' Jets years did probably hurt him in this list. I mean, there's people that we respect, like Sam Monson on Check the Mic, who thought Mahomes shouldn't have made the list. He thought he would have taken Aaron Rodgers over Mahomes. And I kind of get that, but I can't be honest with myself and say, okay, all time I'm ranking Mahomes higher, but I'm going to give Aaron Rodgers the all century team. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. If I'm going to rank him higher all time, I'm going to put him on the quarter century joint team. And I mean, he's done a lot in this quarter century, dude. I mean, we're talking about, 3 Super Bowls. He's been to 5, a couple MVPs. Like he has done a lot in this quarter century. And if he retired tomorrow, he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer. So to me, he's definitely eligible to be on the list. Now, with the certain receiver we're going to talk about later, some guys haven't played long enough, period. They haven't played long enough. But Mahomes, in my opinion, has.
Yeah, and for comparison too, like the guy already has 245 passing touchdowns, which is like 80 more than Hall of Famer Troy Aikman.
You were going there,
not
dude.
to throw shade, but I have to.
I knew you were going to Troy Aikman.
But yeah, I mean, accolade wise, it's insane. Because, like, to be honest, I think Mahomes is on pace to do the same thing Brady did in terms of like you can isolate portions of their career and be like, this is a Hall of Fame resume.
Yeah.
This is a Hall of Fame resume. I think he's going to do a similar thing, not quite to that level because I doubt he's going to play until he's like 44. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think I probably do agree with these three. Rodgers is the one you can debate the most with me, and I could give you that. Other guys that people have probably come up, Eli with 2 Super Bowls. I don't want to hear about it.
Yeah, no, Eli's not in this
Big
conversation.
Ben. Nah, Big Ben, he may be practice squad 3 there with a couple Super Bowls. But again, guys who never won MVPs and like the accolades outside of the team accomplishments. And then a guy like Kurt Warner, where the main Super Bowl he won was in 99. He had a decent career in the 2000s after that with The Greatest Show on Turf. But if that 99 Super Bowl had been in 2000, people would have probably made more of an argument to try to throw him on here with the multiple appearances.
I wonder who would be the 6th guy on this list, because the top 5 they nailed, but who would be the 6th? Because then you could even have the Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson debate. Like, because are you sure
Lamar,
that Big Ben had a better career than Lamar Jackson? Steelers fans are going to be pissed that I said that, but you
and when they see the edge rushers in a minute.
Oh yeah, exactly. They're going to be real. Look away at the edge rushers, Steelers fans. I'm just saying, you have 2 MVPs already. Like, you have to start debating some of the younger guys if you had to pick a 6th quarterback to be in the conversation. I think I would probably lean Big Ben if I had to. But yeah, dude. I mean, yeah, I think this is the one position that I think we'll agree with, like this. They nailed this one.
Yeah, and I think I agree. I think it would be Big Ben for me, but I do think Lamar is really interesting. Like recency, whatever you want to call it, but like the guy's already won a couple MVPs and is on pace to be like by far the greatest rushing quarterback ever. But I'm glad, I would still go Big Ben just for the sake of the full body of work that he accomplished and the 2 Super Bowls. But yeah, I think the quarterbacks. I think they were probably. It's funny because quarterback debates happen all the time, but it was probably one of the easier things to do on this list.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. It was one of the easier ones.
Perfect. All right. Well, now let's move on to running backs, where things go on just an absolute tangent.
Yeah.
Because again, if we're doing this in depth chart order, I don't know who created this, but Priest Holmes is RB1.
Yep.
Christian McCaffrey is RB2, Derrick Henry is RB3, and then practice squad is Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson.
We went from the easiest position to and the one that ESPN nailed to the one that they got completely wrong. And I don't even think it's a hard position to rank all that much, but I will say, let me start with this. Priest Holmes was a great player. in his peak, he was phenomenal. His peak was really, really good. But he did not do enough to get on this list at the end of the day. He had less than 10,000 all purpose yards. He's not in the Hall of Fame. I don't think he will get into the Hall of Fame with some, maybe with like something, a list like this created. Maybe he will. Um, but dude, there, to me, there is no justification to have Priest Holmes as RB1 on this depth chart, dude. Like none. There's just not, because even a guy that made their team on the practice squad in LaDainian Tomlinson, I believe LT's peak was better than Priest Holmes' peak, dude. Like in that 2004 to like 2007 range, LT was the man. He rushed for like what 28 rushing touchdowns in 2006 or something like that. Had over 30 all-purpose touchdowns. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't see the love for Priest Holmes here. I just don't.
I completely agree, and he's getting carried by just those two because he, set the record for rushing touchdowns that LT then broke. But he had those two peak seasons. But outside of that, like he really had three good seasons, and outside of that, that was kind of it. Like you're basically basing his entire career off of that, and that's enough to say he's RB1 over LaDainian Tomlinson, and also another guy that we'll have to mention that got left off completely. Adrian Peterson, future Hall of Famer, Adrian Peterson.
So, just to get into the AP debate, and I'll come back to Holmes in a minute, but you not having a quarter century team and not having Adrian Peterson on the list is kind of shameful. Like to me, there is a argument that AP could be RB1 on this team. Now, if gun to head, I would pick LT. LT's more versatile. And I think I would rank him higher on the all-time list. But Adrian Peterson would be my slam dunk RB2 on this team if I was making this team, dude. Like slam dunk. I wouldn't even think about it. It would be LT and then AP. I really don't understand the hate for AP. I will say I looked into it a little bit, and I think these guys were like heavily weighing in passing like production and like receiving production for running backs. So I think that's why they liked Priest Holmes a little bit more, and why they liked Christian McCaffrey. But if that's the case, then why is LT on the practice squad and CMC's number 2? It just doesn't make sense. Also, another debate with AP is, to me, Derrick Henry and Adrian Peterson are very comparable as far as skill sets are concerned. Like Derrick Henry is also not a very good passing running back in the pass game, whether it's protection or receiving. So to me, are you convinced that Derrick Henry has had a better career than Adrian Peterson? It's close. I will admit it is close at this point, but I think I'm still taking AP, man. I do. Like he was unstoppable. And when he was in the game, Dakota, everybody knew he was getting the ball. Like that was the thing, because they literally would take him out on third downs because he was that bad as a receiving back. But that makes his rushing production even more impressive when the teams know he's getting the ball and they still can't stop it.
Yeah, it's baffling to me. I completely agree. Like LT and AP would be 1 and 2 for me. And then I probably keep Henry at 3. I'm sorry to see him C, but like he just wouldn't be on the team.
No,
I don't know if he'd be he would probably wouldn't be my honorable mention either, because you're guys like, for those that don't know, AP is currently 5th all time in rushing. And it's not just one of those like longevity things that got him there. It was rushing for 200 yards a game multiple times and being an absolute dominant force consistently throughout his career. And I just don't, unless they wanted to cause a stir out of people, I just don't understand the logic. Because to your point with the receiving thing, like LT was a fantastic back every down. Like, like he is pretty high up on my all-time list just from how good he was at everything. And then I guess just for the sake of mentioning other names out there that probably would have come up, you got Frank Gore, which, to be honest, I'm
longevity.
glad they left him off. Yeah, the longevity play, and we will foreshadow a bit. We'll probably go into a Hall of Fame discussion at some point, and probably ruffle some feathers a little bit on our opinions on that. But like Frank Gore, I'm glad that they didn't put him on there just for the sake of the fact that he played forever. And then other guys though, like um, you know, guys that played, guys you would think of to probably throw on this list because you think of when you watched them, but most of their career wasn't in the 2000s, would be like Curtis Martin and the Bus. A good portion of their career was pre 2000.
How about Sean Alexander's peak,
So
Dakota?
that there was the guy I was going to throw out there. He is the guy that I am shocked when comparing his career and stats to Priest Holmes is crazy to me because
I'm taking Sean Alexander.
I am too. So he rushed for those 27 touchdowns, right? In 2003, 2005, Sean Alexander had 27 touchdowns and 1,800. He had 5 straight seasons of 1,000 yards, and of those, he had a 3 straight period where he had 1,400 plus and rushed for 57 touchdowns in 3 years.
Dude, and by the way, I would take Sean Alexander over CMC as well. Like I just would.
100%.
And I get he's more versatile, but I don't know, man. I also don't. It's tough because if you're trying to make the best team, you really only want like one scat back, right? Like if you're trying to make just the best roster, then I'm taking LT as my scat back. Like that's my, potential every down running back or potential third down running back if I want to go that route. And after that, dude, I'm starting to debate guys like Sean Alexander, and we are already agree that Derrick Henry and probably AP would be on that team as well. But the fourth guy is tough. There's a lot of debate. It would not be CMC or Priest Holmes though. It wouldn't.
It wouldn't. And yeah, Sean Alexander was the guy I had in the bucket waiting to pull because he's a kind of a forgotten guy for some outside of just being on a Madden cover. Like Sean Alexander's peak, he just didn't play for very long, but his peak was up there with some of the best who've ever played. And then I just got to throw out a few other names because we've had a really good era of running backs, but like I think greatness, I'd say a lot of good ones, not so much as great in the 2000s, but a few other names that it's at least worth mentioning. Marshall Faulk, most of his career was pre-2000. He was fantastic after that, but he only had a few seasons, like 5 or 6 seasons in the 2000s. A guy I mentioned pre-show, that is an interesting one because, again, back to our Hall of Fame debate, whether or not he'd be a Hall of Famer for me, I don't know. But Edgerrin James, he was drafted in 99, and his entire career was basically in the 2000s, and he gets left off for Priest Holmes and CMC.
Yeah.
And then again, Fred Taylor's another one that's interesting.
Fred Taylor was good. Now, what was his rookie year? Was it 96 or 99? I'm kind of...
It's 98.
Not 98, so neither.
Yeah. And then the other is Steven Jackson. I got to throw his name out there, but I think those are the big ones that I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Jamal Charles. Have you mentioned Jamal Charles? He was solid.
Oh, yeah. Jamal Charles is Chris Johnson. And Marshawn.
Marshawn should be in the conversation as well. We have had a good era of running backs. Man, honestly, if I had the fourth running back would be tough. I'll give ESPN that. Now they missed AP, which is not forgivable.
Ever.
But the fourth one
and they
would be
so bad.
Yeah, so bad
on RB1.
Yeah. Oh, in RB1. Yeah, exactly. Like,
so for context, for anybody that I'm just looking at stats as we talk through this, and this isn't indicative of everything, right? Because Priest Holmes had a way better peak than this guy, but Zeke Elliott is higher on the all-time rushing list currently than Priest Holmes, I think, which is crazy.
And that's the and we're going to kind of get into our Hall of Fame opinions here, but that's kind of the big debate, right? Like, I think longevity has to play a factor at some point.
Yeah.
Like, it has to play a role because, we just got done talking about how Priest Holmes was basically 3 seasons and that's it. And so if he just had those 3 seasons and didn't have the like, I don't know, man, it's hard to put a guy that didn't even rush for 10,000 yards on the list. Because longevity does matter to a certain extent, especially when certain guys had peaks that were similar to me. Priest Holmes. Like if your peak is similar, then of course we have to go to longevity next. Like that's just that's obvious.
Yeah, 100%, dude. But But yeah, running back is, I think probably easily running back was the biggest thing they whiffed on, in my opinion. And I would say
Agreed.
most people would agree with that. Of just, and it's no disrespect to Priest Holmes because I think and it's funny because this is the type of thing that can make people hate a guy they didn't know.
Yeah.
But like, no
True.
disrespect to him, but like, like he's a forgotten player who was really good, but to do this
Yes.
is just so outlandish.
It's so
Um,
outlandish. To me, the
it,
obvious ones are LT, RB1, and then RB2 is AP. And then from there, it's probably Derrick Henry, RB3, and then you can debate, okay, who's going to be the fourth guy? And there's probably like 10 different names I'd pull from.
Before Priest
Yeah.
Holmes.
Possibly.
And then fullback, we'll touch on it just for the sake of it. It's Kyle Juszczyk. I mean, it's fullback. We're not going to spend a ton of time on that. Lorenzo Neal from the Chargers is one of the only like fullbacks I think of from earlier, like early to mid 2000s, who was just like, oh yeah, that guy's a fullback and he's playing a lot. They mentioned Patrick Ricard, but I feel like that's weird.
Not comparable.
No, it's just not. So
yeah, the fullback just kind of died in this era, man. It's not what it used to be. Kyle Juszczyk is more of like just utility. Like yeah, exactly. He's not really a true like bruising fullback like you think of back in the day. So yeah, don't have much to say about fullback. Juszczyk was just kind of like, you're the last fullback left, so you get this award basically.
Pretty much. He made it. He made the team. All right, now we'll jump to wide receivers and tight ends. I think I made a graphic for both, and now I'm realizing probably should have done separately because there's so many of them. But
no, you made one for wide receivers and tight ends together.
Well, that's what I mean. I think I should have done it separately.
Oh,
it's on me.
Gotcha.
I take the fall. But wide receivers, this is one I think the end of this is debatable. First five, probably not. But wide receiver 1 is Randy Moss. Check. Wide receiver 2 is Megatron. Check. Yeah. Wide receiver 3, the order here is where you could get a little interesting to me. Wide receiver 3 being Julio is interesting. Wide receiver 4, T.O. Wide receiver 5, Marvin Harrison, Hall of Famer. And then
it falls off hard.
And then it just like appeasing generations or something is going on here where it's like most of these receivers played the majority of their career like pre-2015, to be honest. And then you get Justin Jefferson as wide receiver 6 with honorable mention practice squad players, as they label it, of Antonio Brown and Andre Johnson.
Yeah. So like it was really good 1 through 5. Like you said, you can debate the order. But then the 6th guy and one of the practice squad guys wouldn't make my team. First of all, Justin Jefferson was a rookie in 2020, dude. And he is the best receiver of his era. I understand that. He is. And he is on a Hall of Fame trajectory. But to me, right now on this team, if you're not a guy who retires tomorrow and would be a Hall of Famer, you shouldn't make this list. You just should not make the list because there's so many other options. Justin Jefferson would not make the Hall of Fame right now. He just wouldn't. He just hasn't done enough yet. And is he a great player? Yes. Is he a better player than Antonio Brown? Sorry to upset the 15-year-olds who do nothing but watch TikTok edits, but no. Antonio Brown's peak was better, and his longevity obviously is better. He's played through his entire career. Antonio Brown was a better wide receiver than Justin Jefferson. Now, Justin Jefferson can change that. He still has years left to change that. But no, Justin Jefferson should not be on this list whatsoever.
Yeah, I completely agree. And again, it's like no disrespect to the guy, but like, and I don't know, this is where like the way they decided to do this is just very interesting to me, where they're using some stats and stuff to kind of back it up. But it's like full body of work wise right now, like he's just not on the list. Like if you're projecting the rest of his career, fine, but you can't really do that when doing it all. Exactly. Like it's his career up to 2024, not what it'll be after that. And so, yeah, I mean, he's that part just doesn't make much sense to me. Like I get what they're trying to do and including a guy like that and more recent, but he has no business being on the list, in my opinion. And there's a long list of guys that I think should be on there over him. Obviously, Antonio Brown. like regardless of the absolute CTE fest he's spiraled into, his
Yeah.
peak is
Uh,
arguably up there with the greatest ever, arguably
Greatest
the
ever.
best. So he deserves to be on the starting over him. And then the one that we just have to point out that is just baffling that didn't even make the practice squad is the second all-time leading receiver in NFL history, Larry Fitz.
Yeah.
Not on the team.
Listen, dude. And I think there's names you could debate over Larry Fitz.
Yeah.
Andre Johnson
Yeah.
is not one of those names. Andre Johnson or Justin Jefferson is not one of those names. Larry Fitzgerald was had a good peak, and B, that like there was a point in his career where he was a top 5 receiver. Plus his longevity is really to me it's more impressive than a guy like Frank Gore's longevity, because Frank
Yeah.
Gore, you can just give him the ball 25 times a game and he's going to get his 85 yards. You know what I mean? Receivers, there's more of an effort that goes into getting those yards and staying consistent. And Larry Fitzgerald definitely falls into that bucket. Having Justin Jefferson over Larry Fitzgerald is just absolutely absurd, man. I mean, it also needs to be said, Larry Fitzgerald, like, how many drops did he have in his career? He's one of the all-time, maybe the best hands ever in
Yeah.
NFL history.
Probably. Without Stickum. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Without Stickum, non-Stickum air hands, he's one of the best ever. And I also think there's other names you could debate, man. Like, one I'll throw out, Torrey Holt. Torrey Holt, man, he was I mean, he was a part of what you were talking about earlier, Kurt Warner. He was a part of that Greatest Show on Turf team. He was probably the best wide receiver on that team. His peak was really, really good. He should already be in the Hall of Fame. To me, he should have got into the Hall of Fame over Andre Johnson, in my opinion, Dakota. So that's one guy. Reggie Wayne, I would debate. Like, Reggie Wayne was really good for a long time. Over Andre Johnson, yeah, I probably would put him over Andre Johnson, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I agree. Man, Torrey Holt's probably one of the most disrespected players in NFL history. The dude just
Yes.
doesn't get love. Isaac Bruce gets all of it, and they're just like, yeah, Torrey was also just there. He was great, but he was there. Yeah, I completely agree with the guys you throw out. And another one I'll throw out, Steve Smith.
Of course.
Steve Smith deserves that. And then even guys that I think are worth debating over Justin Jefferson, if we're looking at the longevity and totality of their careers already, would be D Hop.
Yeah.
And Devontae Adams, even. I mean,
Yeah.
people can make an argument for Mike Evans. That one's okay for me, but like those two specifically would be really interesting ones for me. And then another name just worth throwing out there that's interesting too is Brandon Marshall. God, this kind of gets forgotten. I wouldn't have him starting. I mean, Anquan Bolden. You get into the debate of like wide receiver 8, 9, and 10 on the team, but a few of the guys you just tossed out, like Steve Smith, Reggie Wayne, T.O. especially, and AB would all start over Jay Jettis.
I'm actually baffled how they have Andre Johnson over Larry Fitzgerald. I can't get over that.
That is offensive.
That's baffling, dude. I mean, was there any point in Andre Johnson's career? And by the way, for those who don't know or can't tell, we grew up in this era, brother. We can talk about this era of football. We were literally becoming football fans while these guys were in their primes. And so it's not like we're the 15-year-old on TikTok that's seen nothing but Jay Jet's, TikTok edits. We grew up watching these guys. I can't remember a time where I was convinced Andre Johnson was a better wide receiver than Larry Fitzgerald, like ever.
It didn't happen. I'm also looking at stats. It's kind of crazy. Andre Johnson never had a season where, and I know stats aren't everything, but he never had a season with double-digit receiving touchdowns. It's kind of crazy for a guy who just got into the Hall of Fame. Yeah. Which, again, back to our Hall of Fame discussions. That is what it is. But yeah, man, when they were making this list, I do think they kind of pointed at some guys and were like, who could we just disrespect right to their face? You know what I mean? Like literal Hall of Famers, some of the greatest to ever play at their position. And they're like, yeah, you're not making the team, buddy. Sorry.
Yeah, man. I'm looking at it. I just keep seeing Larry Fitzgerald as the second all-time receiving leader in NFL history. And I'm just thinking, wait, Andre Johnson made it over him? Yeah, to me, I would definitely drop Jay Jets and Andre Johnson from the list, and then I would probably throw in Torrey Holt and Larry Fitzgerald. Man, those would probably be the two guys I'm throwing in. Again, I would debate Reggie Wayne. He's top 10 all time in receiving yards, and was really good. Like once Marvin Harrison left, people forgot. Like he became the number one wide receiver after Marvin Harrison was
Yeah.
gone, and was really really good. Um, Speaking of Marvin Harrison too, he needs to be higher on the depth chart. Like to me,
Yeah.
I'm putting him above Julio Jones. And I would even have a debate with Calvin. I would probably go Calvin. But if you want to make the best lineup, just the best lineup, who do you want on the field? You definitely want Randy on the field. The other side, wide receiver number 2, just as far as skill sets are concerned, Marvin Harrison might be your best option to pair with Randy Moss.
Yeah, I like that. I definitely would rearrange that. Julio would definitely be bumped down to 5. If not, probably, well, actually, he'd be 6th at that point. Like you'd have to completely rearrange it because whoever we're bringing in off of apparently the free agency pool, who didn't even make the freaking roster, is starting over him.
Yeah,
And again, so offense to Julio, but like, man, come on. But yeah, Reggie Wayne's an interesting one because I think as we've entered this era of like, the passing league that we have, a lot of guys are high up on the receiving all-time list that you probably didn't think were there. And Reggie Wayne, it's like almost poetic that him and Marvin are 9 and 10. So Marvin's 9th, he's 10th. And they're literally what, like 135 yards apart as well. It's kind of uncanny to be honest. But yeah, Reggie Wayne's pretty underrated for his career, especially post Peyton and how post Marvin Harrison and how he did just become wide receiver 1 and wore that crown perfectly. So
yeah,
cool.
I agree with that. I'll also, just last thing I'll say is I might even start AB over Julio Jones. That's the debate
Yeah,
to me.
yeah, yeah.
Like as far as like who's the best in their air, I would have that debate heavily.
I think that is completely fair.
All right, tight end
Cool.
time.
Tight ends, which again, this is going to be one we probably don't even spend a ton of time
No,
on at all because it's the least debatable, I think, of all of these.
it
So
is.
TE1, Gronk, TE2, Travis Kelce, TE3, Tony Gonzalez, and then practice squad, Antonio Gates. And I mean, Jason Witten is the only other name I would throw out who's probably deserving of being in the conversation from that era, really. But it is those 4 guys. Like it's those 4.
This is the one list probably this in quarterback that they just completely nailed. Wasn't a very hard list to make either. I won't give them credit for this one because this one was very obvious. Gronk is easily the greatest tight end ever. I'll stand on that. I'm very convinced of that. He was the most unguardable player maybe in the NFL at his peak, plus a mauling run blocker. First of all, tight ends these days do not block. You do not see run blocking tight ends that also are good at catching the ball these days. It's a lost breed. Gronk did both. Greatest tight end ever. And then Travis Kelce, what he's doing, his longevity, plus obviously the peak. I mean, once Gronk retired, Kelce was the, without question, best tight end in the NFL. And then Tony G, obviously can't make this list without Tony Gonzalez. Tony Gonzalez him and guys like Shannon Sharp kind of opened opportunities for guys like Travis Kelce and Gronkowski because back in the day the tight end's job wasn't to be a receiver. It was receiver plus blocking 50-50. And once Tony G and guys like Antonio Gates and Shannon Sharp, like those guys kind of changed the game and made it to where, okay, tight ends can just be true receiving threats. So of course Tony Gonzalez has to make the list. And then the practice squad, I have no issues with that. I think the other name I'll throw out is George Kittle, for a recent guy, but I don't think he's done enough to surpass Antonio Gates. I mean, he's had so many injury issues, which that kind of stuff matters. Like you have to play. It can't just be all peak, but Kittle might get there one day, but that's like the only guy I can really think of that would be debatable.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'd probably move. Again, I think there's a little bit of recency bias that has played into a lot of this. I would probably put Tony G above Kelce still, to be completely honest. Again, I think we just kind of forget how good he was at his peak and what he was doing.
9-time All-Pro, by the way.
Yeah, 9-time All-Pro, and did it for 2 different teams. I mean, some people knock people for that, but he was fantastic for two different teams.
People forget how good he was as a Falcon, dude.
Yeah.
That year that they went to the NFC Championship was a lot because of Tony Gonzalez, dude. He was fantastic with Atlanta. At his age too, like he really,
Oh yeah.
I mean, his longevity was impressive because it's not like he was just, dragging along. Like it felt like at the end of, Jason Witten's career, he was kind of just dragging along. And I mean, it was kind of always like that. He was never just like a guy that was going to get a lot of yak or anything like that. He was mostly just a get 6 yards and go down kind of guy. But still, Tony Gonzalez was really special. So I think there's a very legitimate argument, especially when look what Kelsey has had since 2018, man. He's had a guy who's made this list, and then go look at what Tony Gonzalez was working with, which is basically
outside
Trent
of
Green.
Matt Ryan.
Yeah, exactly. Matt Ryan for a couple years and Trent Green. It's like not great quarterback work.
Yeah, when Trent Green's brain was working around the concussions.
Sure.
And then Gronk at number 1, I think is just undebatable. I mean, the guy, that level of dominance for that, like that amount of time, like even just a short period for his career, was able to accomplish everything that he did is insane. And then the other names I would throw out just for the sake of putting them out there, not that I would actually put these guys on there, but I think are worth noting would be, Witten. Kittle's a good shout. I think Jimmy Graham is an interesting shout. Greg Olsen, interesting shout. Outside of that, Vernon Davis, some of these guys just didn't have a high enough peak or like a long enough peak, because Vernon Davis had some like really good seasons, but then kind of fell off. So I feel like this was one of the easier lists for them to make.
It was. It was definitely one of the easier lists.
All right. Now we move into the trenches, and let's look at the offensive line, starting with the left tackles. I don't think there's going to be a ton of argument on the. Oh wow! I just saw one of the practice squad guys. Maybe there is some debate. That's interesting. So, starting left tackle is Joe Thomas, and then LT2 is Trent Williams, with the practice squad of Walter Jones and Jordan Mailata. Well, and the Jordan Mailata is the thing I'm reacting to there.
But here's the thing with the Jordan Mailata. They have him as the international player pathway, and they're getting, remember, that's like a free spot on your practice squad these days for the guys that come through that. And
so they did, okay.
Yeah, he's like the best player ever that's come through that. So that's kind of like cheating. Like he wouldn't make the true practice squad.
But
so they kind of cheated with that a little bit. It's kind of cool to have that in there because he is the best player to come through the international player pathway. But outside of that, dude, I mean, it's like you said, it's pretty hard to debate these guys. Orlando Pace is interesting because he started in the late 90s, but I think enough of his career was in the 2000s that you could say Orlando Pace. He was an absolute monster. And
he was drafted in 97, so he had enough time.
I feel like that's enough time. I mean, Marvin Harrison was drafted in 1996. So to me, Orlando Pace probably, and he played on some of the best offenses of all time. So he's probably a guy, but it's hard to do. It's tough because left tackle, I mean, these are some really good players. Like I'm obviously going to have Joe Thomas on the team, and Trent Williams has been probably the most underrated player in the NFL since he's been in the NFL, because the trenches just don't get enough love. But Trent Williams has been, I mean, there's been years where he ranked like as PFF's highest graded player in the NFL. Like that's how good Trent Williams has been. So I don't disagree with him being on here at all. And then Walter Jones, another Hall of Famer who is just really, really good. So it's a really good list. Obviously, if Jordan Mailata was just purely on the practice squad, that would be insane to have him over Orlando Pace. But since they kind of cheated and put him in the international player pathway, I get it.
Yeah, my only quarrel with it, I'm Joe Thomas is a starter for me no matter what. But I love Trent. I do think he's been underrated, but I think. I don't know. I think, and they probably took an easy way out, because the three names that come to mind are Pace, Walter Jones, and Jonathan Ogden.
Yeah.
Ogden, and all of them were, and just for the sake of it, I'll mention the right tackles are Lane Johnson and Willie Anderson, just so that's out there. But like, those are ones where they were all drafted in the late 90s. So I think they're getting punished a little bit for because it's like, how do you evaluate a tackle's career outside of just starts and all pros, and a lot of their all pros may have been pre that. But I don't know. It would have been tough for me to not put a guy like Ogden, even though he's drafted in '96. It's tough because it's like a guy like
And
that is
Orlando
pretty
Pace.
much
I mean, some people think
stuck.
Orlando Pace is the greatest
Yeah,
left tackle ever. You
yeah,
know?
and I mean like it's unfortunate because especially with a guy like that and even Pace, we're like drafted in '97, drafted in '96. Walter Jones is '97. Man, the tackles in those 2 years are insane. But like,
Loaded,
are
dude.
they ever gonna make a list like this? Because they can't make the all quarter century for this side of it. Would they make the all quarter century for the other side of it with only having a few? You know what I mean? They're kind of in an
Yeah,
unfortunate draft spot there.
they are. I mean, really, you could say, looking at the list, left tackle is one of the stronger positions, to be completely honest with you. I mean, it's loaded at left tackle. You're right. I mean, having this list without Jonathan Ogden and Orlando Pace just feels wrong. But again, it's not like I disagree with the guys on here. It's just the guys that aren't on here. It's tough to
Yeah,
make room for them, dude. Um, the right
yeah,
tackle, Lane Johnson's a slam dunk to me. Lane Johnson might go down as the greatest right tackle of all time. Like I don't think that's a insane thing to say. Lane Johnson has been unbelievable. Um, I will say, like, PFF has helped offensive line evaluation so much, dude, because back in the day, they did a study. Neil Hornsby, the creator of PFF, did like a study or whatever of, well, I wouldn't really call it a study. It's more just research of right tackles, like in all pros in like the basically the 80s and 90s, and they would always give it to a right tackle on a winning team, like no matter who it was.
mm,
If your record was like 12 wins or higher, the right tackle would always make all pro no matter who it was, which is horrible. I mean, it's not a clear evaluation of who's playing right tackle the best at all. But PFF has completely changed the game where they're literally evaluating every player on every play. So now it's hard to watch an offensive lineman for every snap in the season. It's actually
yeah,
impossible if you're trying to pay attention to other parts of the NFL. So now we have a resource like PFF where we can say, okay, this guy was better than this guy. We know Marquise Pouncey, just to trigger Steelers fans more. We know Marquise Pouncey at center might not have been as good as a player as perception would say. So, just had to shout that out because it's going to be really helpful going forward with PFF and actually knowing who's the best in the trenches.
that's a really good point. And we could debate all day on Marquise Pouncey and when names, especially and what hurt that even more is when Pro Bowl voting opened up to fans and the
Yep.
name is all they knew. And so you vote a guy into the Pro Bowl and that becomes a stat. A good thing is they don't even mention that on this, really. It's just all about all pros. So I'm glad because I don't care about how many times Pouncey got voted as a Pro Bowler by fans who don't watch centers play ever and
Yeah,
don't even
exactly.
know offensive line play. But Willie Anderson as the other tackle is interesting just because he was drafted in '96. But right tackle, as that list kind of proved, the guys we just talked through, right tackle's been a little bit thinner in terms of like the greats there
It's because teams put their best player at left tackle.
at left.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's just kind of the bias that they had for so long. That's changing, I think, but that's been the bias. One guy that they could have been on here over Willie Anderson was Mitchell Schwartz. He
yep.
graded really well with PFF throughout his entire career. One of the more underrated players of his era. But you're right, man. I mean, right tackle is obviously a lot worse than left tackle.
Yeah, and now into the interior, left guard Alan Faneca and Steve Hutchinson. Center is Jason Kelsey. They only have one. And then it's so weird the ones they choose to do practice squad. I guess it's because when they were looking at this list, they were like, where are we going to have depth at based on
Yeah,
the player? Right guards are Zach Martin, Marshall Yanda, and then practice squad Jari Evans. Um, my immediate thought with that is like, I'm fine with all of that, to be honest. I think right guard's probably the least debatable, to be completely honest with you, because
yeah,
Zach Martin
Zach.
and Marshall Yanda are probably going to be two of the best ever.
Yes, agreed. Marshall Yonda, is he? So he's eligible. Has he gotten the Hall of Fame? Was surely he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, right? If he's
I don't
not
know
a
if he's
first
gotten
ballot
in
Hall of
yet,
Famer,
which is just respectful, but
it's Marshall Yonda should be a first ballot Hall of Famer, obviously. And Zach Martin, one of the best guards to ever play. That's obvious. He literally just retired this past season. He will be a slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famer. Jason Kelsey will be a slam dunk first ballot Hall of
Wow.
Famer.
Yeah, Yanda's not in. He was eligible this year and didn't make
It's
it, which is
See,
disrespectful.
it's just the hate that the trenches get, man.
Same debate, man.
It's
We
I
got to do
know,
it.
dude. I
If you're
know,
literally the
I
best of
know.
a generation and one of the best to ever play a position,
Marshall
yeah.
Yonda, it should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's literally no question about it. But center is a little interesting. I'll say there were some names that we were looking at that potentially could have got in over Jason Kelsey. We threw out Jeff Saturday. Jeff Saturday is not in the Hall of Fame yet, but might get in one day. You never know with the Hall of Fame because Torrey Holt's still waiting to get in. Apparently, Marshall Yonda's still waiting to get in my Hall of Fame. Marshall Yonda would have been a slam dunk first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Jason Kelsey seems like I don't know. He is fantastic, but again, it's just the recency bias in this is pretty evident. Because I do wonder how much people's careers, especially with offensive linemen, and it's back to the grading thing where it's like, how much is their career and our perception of their career just what we were told or what they were put on lists like this because nobody actually watched them play, really. Because to be completely honest, one of the things that I will always like knock Jason Kelsey for that I do not understand why he's never gotten more like flack for this is his snaps are terrible. His shotgun snaps are like scooting across the ground constantly. Like there's that clip of when Jalen Hurts is talking about how that thing's getting back there fast, and I thought they were going to talk about the fact that he always had to be like crouched to like a freaking catcher almost at baseball to get the ball, and that's something that's literally your most of your job is the snapping the ball back portion. But I think recency has helped him a bit because I think Nick Mangold was the other name.
Yep.
We were talking about that. I think would kind of deserve to be there.
Agreed.
Yeah, and outside of those two of him and Jeff Saturday, there's not a ton of names that pop into mind for center, but
yeah, Nick Mangold was the guy I was trying to think of. So he made PFF kind of made a similar team, and he was PFF's highest graded center for his career. He had a 95.3 PFF grade. They also started grading PFF like during his rookie season. Like that was their first year grading, and he was good his entire career, man. And I'm also pretty sure he's not on the Hall of Fame. I think with PFF, they'll start getting better at evaluating guys that should be in and shouldn't. Because Kelsey's obviously, he's a guy that, like was probably second on PFF's list. Like he's a guy that should be in. But a guy like, Marquise Pouncey that we keep talking about, a guy who will be a Hall of Famer. He's going to make the Hall of Fame because of his Pro Bowls. He would not come close to PFF's list. Like he probably wouldn't even make like, if there was 100-man roster, he probably wouldn't make it. So I'm hoping the Hall of Fame and things like that, they get better at evaluating O-line play.
Hopefully, because just seeing Marquise's name listed here as part of the debate they basically had makes me want to throw up a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the left guards, to be honest, I mean, Logan Mankins, who I started to say a second ago, could be debated there, but like a lot of people probably don't even know Alan Faneca and Steve Hutchinson.
I think Hutchinson should be above Faneca, by the way.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Steve Hutchinson is probably better than Alan Faneca.
And his entire career was also in this quarter century.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not much debate here for me either, dude. It's one of those positions that you can debate a few names. Like they threw out Quentin Nelson, definitely not. You can't listen. I feel like the cutoff for me, guys who can make the list that are new guys, is Mahomes in 17. Everybody after that, you have not done enough to make this list.
I think this has also taught us something because just looking at this and like who the options were of like Evan Mathis was the honorable mention for PFF is like the offensive line play seems to have been dominated by left tackles and right guards apparently because I think Larry Allen was a right guard specifically as well. So it's like dominated by two positions apparently. All right.
That is one thing that sucks about this list, though. Like a guy like Larry Allen doesn't fit in, like you said, he doesn't fit in either category, which is tough because Larry Allen is probably the best guard of all time.
The best right guard ever, or guard in general. Yeah,
literally the best guard to ever play. but he doesn't get to be on this list. So yeah, that's one goofy thing about this, but you know, kind of. I mean, I get it. Like if most of your career was in the '90s, I get it.
All right, that wraps up the offense. Now we'll go to defense, and we have some debating here immediately
Yes,
because
no question.
again, when I first skimmed through this, I wasn't paying attention to like the starters and stuff, and that is interesting. So, edge rusher one, Demarcus Ware.
Yeah.
Edge rusher two is Jared Allen. Edge rusher three is Miles Garrett. Sorry, Steelers fans. Edge rusher four is Julius Peppers. And then the practice squad is TJ Watt and Michael Strahan.
Definitely an interesting list. To continuing, I don't know why we're hammering in Steelers fans. There's a heavy debate that you would start Miles Garrett on this team. But one name that jumps off the page that's not on the page is Von Miller. Von Miller should be on this team. Von Miller is kind of the new age pass rusher. A little bit more of a finesse guy, more of a speed rusher. I guess you have guys like another guy that maybe should have made the list, like Dwight Freeney, kind of falls in that category as well. But yeah, I mean, that's right off the bat. I'm looking at names that I feel like were better players than, like, I think Von Miller had a better career than Julius Peppers, even if Von Miller didn't play another snap in the NFL. I think you could have that argument about Jared Allen. Now I know Jared Allen in his peak was really good. He was an insanely good player, and all these guys are obviously, like Julius Peppers has 59 and a half sacks, but I never felt like Julius Peppers was like the best pass rusher in the league. Like he was solid every year, which matters. Like that definitely matters, but I never felt like he was the best in the NFL. There was definitely points of Von Miller's career where I'm like, okay, this guy's potentially the best pass rusher in the league.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's interesting because Peppers, and I feel like maybe I underrate him a bit, but yeah, like I feel like he which is valuable. He got most of his statistics and whatnot off of longevity. I mean, he played for like freaking 18 years or something ridiculous.
Yeah.
He's just here forever. But yeah, Von Miller not even being on there is a wild one. It kind of comes back to the receiver stuff to me, where because even looking at these guys listed here, the only guy here who has more sacks than him, I think, is Julius Peppers, which is crazy. And he also has, like, of these guys, without a doubt, the best moment as well. Like the guy's a Super Bowl MVP.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff. I think, like, when we're talking about comparable resumes, those are the kind of things that should be tiebreakers. Don't you think? Like, when you're talking about a guy who has as many sacks or maybe a little bit more sacks and has as many all pros, then we have to go to things like, okay, who had the best moment? Who had the, the clutchest play? I mean that helped them win a Super Bowl, like that, and he won Super Bowl MVP. So it's like, yeah, I mean, to me, Von Miller has to be on this list. He would 100% make it over TJ Watt. It wouldn't even be a question. He would make it over Julius Peppers as well, in my opinion. Another guy, Khalil Mack. Khalil Mack should have been in consideration for this list. Khalil Mack had a really insane peak. Like, if it weren't for, which they play two different positions, but talking about the best defensive player in the NFL, if it weren't for JJ Watt and Aaron Donald, Khalil Mack would have been known as the best defensive player in the NFL. And we're talking about two guys in Aaron Donald and JJ Watt that are A, on this list, and B, two of the greatest defensive players in NFL history. So, I mean, Khalil Mack should have definitely been in consideration.
Yeah, and I'm going to speak ahead just slightly to clarify that. Like, JJ is listed as versatile defensive lineman, so he's starting at that position because they didn't want to. Yeah, because he did play like a 3-tech a lot, but you could line him up on edge. He moved around everywhere, so they didn't want to put him at D tackle or edge. So he is just the defensive lineman. But yeah, I agree, and yeah, it's interesting because another guy I would throw out there that I think is getting overlooked too, are guys that just you kind of forget about, is Jason Taylor, because his entire career was pretty much in, most of his career was in this quarter century. And then honestly, an underrated guy, but again, longevity play wise, is Terrell Suggs.
Yeah.
Who just had a ton of sacks.
Part of some great defenses as well.
Yeah. And again, Hall of Fame discussion stuff aside, and I grew up. The first player I fell in love with that made me watch football was Dwight Freeney.
Yep.
Like I was the first jersey I ever had was a Dwight Freeney jersey, and like his spin move was just iconic. And he is a
Unstoppable,
Hall of
man.
Famer, so it's like we left a Hall of Famer off this list technically. Which again, all that debating aside, but yeah, unfortunately, and I know like Steelers fans feel like everybody's out to get them with T.J. Watt, and that like but he's just not there yet,
He's
and he's
also
been
still
hurt
super young.
quite a bit.
I mean,
And
he's
he
a
is,
rookie in
yeah, he get
2018 or
there, but for
17.
this, yeah, for this quarter century, he just wouldn't be there for me.
No.
Um, and another name, just an interesting one to throw out as a guy drafted in 2000 is John Abraham, who I think is a bit underrated
Yep.
as a pass rusher, and Robert Mathis too, the other Colt.
Yeah, yeah, and it's also interesting that they had Strahan on the list when was his was his when did he break the sack record? Was that in the 2000s? I feel like it
I
was.
think it was. He was
Okay.
drafted in like 93.
Was he
So most of
really?
his career.
Oh my
Yeah.
lord. So yeah, I mean that's to me that's
Let's see.
Strahan being on it is interesting.
2001. So it's like
Okay.
right at the
So,
turn. And
so
then he
I
had
get it.
18 and a half. His two best seasons were in this quarter
Oh,
century.
so I get that. I do understand that. He would probably make my list as well. I mean, if we're talking about like, yeah, again, I kind of look at this like you're trying to build the best team. He wouldn't be on my
Yeah, yeah.
practice squad. Like Strahan's peak is of course better than Julius Peppers. Like, are you kidding me? So yeah, and TJ Watt wouldn't make the list. And it's just because again, I mean, we're talking about a quarter century team, so of course it's pretty much every position is going to be loaded, but there are some positions that are more loaded than others. And I would definitely say edge rusher is one of those positions, dude. I mean, there's a lot of good names to debate, obviously. But yeah, I mean, the biggest miss to me was probably Von Miller.
Yeah, completely agree. Rest of it, honestly, yeah. Compared to other ones, I would rearrange this a bit. Yeah, like the order would probably be very different. Um, I probably wouldn't have Allen and Demarcus starting, but yeah. All right, let's go to the interior. So this one's a little bit better. I mean, this one's also a little bit like kind of hard to debate all four of these in my opinion. DT1, Aaron Donald, shocker. DT2, Calais Campbell. DT3, Chris Jones. Practice squad of Kevin Williams, which is a good shout, and then Cameron Hayward. And then they have a specific nose tackle option for Vince Wilfork, which it's like, how are you going to argue that?
Yeah, how are you gonna argue that exactly? Um, yeah, so D tackle obviously Aaron Donald's number one. Probably, I mean, he's a top three defensive player of all time, if not number one all time. That's probably a debate we'll have at some point. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure they're literally talking about this in this article because I see Lawrence Taylor and Reggie White mentioned, and those are the other guys
And
that I would
Bruce
debate
Smith.
as
Yeah.
the greatest ever. So Calais Campbell's
Yeah.
interesting because Calais Campbell is a guy who is a great player, and he's been a great player for a long, long time. But I don't know if his peak was ever there. It's really just so like it's more so he has been really good since like 2008. It's like, and he's still playing, which is insane. And that definitely is probably worthy of being on the list. No question about it. But I just kind of find that interesting. He's not a guy that I think of as far as peak is concerned, but a guy who's just been really good for a long time.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mention that because looking at these stats is kind of wild to me. Like Aaron Donald, how good Aaron Donald really is insane. So he was
It's just
drafted
stupid, man.
6 years after Calais Campbell and retired in 23. Calais played last year. So it's like 7 years less of football, and he's half a sack ahead of him. So Calais is probably past that if he's still playing this year, but he is Aaron Donald's ahead of him with 7 less seasons.
Dude, I love talking about the greatness of Aaron Donald. One of the best Aaron Donald kind of like lore moments in his career was Sean McVay talking about how during like joint practices when they invite like a team into camp or whatever, they have to literally take Aaron Donald out of the game. They literally have to take Aaron Donald out of practice just so that the practice can function. Like just so that the practice isn't so hectic because Aaron Donald is wrecking so many plays, they have to take him out and let the other team run their offense without seeing Aaron Donald. Because of course, you're not going to play a guy at his level every week in the league, and you want to get certain looks. So that's just, I mean, Aaron Donald is arguably the greatest player of all time. He was unbelievable. Chris Jones being on the list is interesting. He's definitely eligible for the list, even though he is a younger guy that's still playing, rookie in 2016. But I think he should make it. Like Kevin Williams and Cameron Hayward, like they're both really good, but like to me, like I you're taking Chris Jones over those guys, like as far as just again peak, but it's like at this point Chris Jones has played enough where I don't even think longevity is a question. The other guy I'll throw out there as a guy that possibly should have made it is Richard Seymour. Richard Seymour is a guy who was really good in the early 2000s, a guy that probably should have been considered for the list.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah, and Kevin Williams is an interesting one. For those that aren't familiar with him, played most of his career with the Vikings. One thing it's clear that they did here is focus on pass rush.
Yeah.
They clearly pick guys because Kevin Williams started his career off decent, but he was a very good run defender, just very good. But it's obvious that they kind of focused on pass rush when kind of creating these guys. An interesting guy that I would throw out there as a potential option too, though, is Haloti Ngata.
Yeah.
That's another shout of somebody who you can make the argument for. I really like the Richard Seymour one. I think he would deserve to be on there, especially with what his peak was and his role in those teams that won Super Bowls for the Patriots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We also I want to go back to the JJ Watt discussion. I love that they did this, the versatile defensive lineman, because he was insanely good as an interior player and as an edge rusher, dude. And I mean, JJ Watt is a guy that, again, if it weren't for Aaron Donald, we'd be discussing JJ Watt as the guy that is in that, potentially top 5 defensive player of all time conversation. Even with his injury problems, man, he still racked up a ton of crazy stats. He just was dealing with so many injuries throughout his career. If he had just like if he was less injury prone, JJ Watt could have easily gone down as the greatest defensive player ever. I'll say he played against my Colts. I'm a Colts fan for those who are listening and don't know. I remember games against the Texans and JJ Watt where it felt like JJ Watt was literally just winning the game. There was a game where he got a pick 6 against Andrew Luck, and I'm pretty sure he caught a touchdown as a tight end, and he was wrecking havoc on a down-to-down basis. I'm like, without JJ Watt, they literally do not win this game. And to say that as an edge rusher, dude, is just unbelievable to make that kind of impact as a defensive lineman. So that's just how good JJ Watt was.
Yeah, and again, it's like being fans of teams that were in the same division. Like, I think that's also kind of shows that we do, for the most part, put our biases aside, because we trashed on Andre Johnson a bit earlier. He also played for both of our teams. Funny enough.
Yeah, but like we forget that part of that. But
we do, yeah. But like we watched the guys in our division like those. And again, to your point too, of like when we started watching football back then and like kind of watched their entire careers play out. But then there's guys like JJ where it's like they're kind of being underrated now, in our opinion, from having watched him. Because you're right, dude. When he was at his peak and he won Defensive Player of the Year, like, man. Oh my, like you couldn't block the guy. And he has some of the most iconic moments too, like being able to score him when he like shattered his nose and was just like still out there looking like an absolute demon. Yeah. And I have to just share this because of like the person that he is. I went to a Titans Texans game in like 2016 maybe. And it was in Nashville. And I think Mettenberger was starting that day because we were going to watch, maybe in 15, because I think it was Mariota's rookie year, and we ended up having to watch Mettenberger instead. Lost like 30-0. Good times. Classic nice. Titans outing.
Classic Zach Mettenberger at the helm.
Classic Mettenberger performance, that's for sure. He probably, JJ almost probably killed him that game. But yeah, I'll never forget pregame, it was so cool. Like JJ went out there before all the players were warming up and stuff, and he went around the bottom of the stadium and had a football and was just throwing it up into the stands with kids and would have it throw it back. And it's just like, I know that doesn't determine him making this team, but like, yeah, like the type of person he was too, I think is worth noting. And yeah, I think he is probably still, I think he is underrated. And to your point, the injury stuff really sucks because he was probably on course to be like a top 2, 3 edge rusher of all time or defensive lineman in general had it not kind of gotten derailed from injuries.
I believe him and Aaron Donald are the only players ever to win 3 Defensive Player of the Years. Possibly Lawrence Taylor as well. I'm not positive on that off the top of my head, but they did both win 3. So yeah, like having his own, also like just having your own position. I mean, that says so much. Like they showed a ton of respect to him in this list because I mean, it really just speaks to his greatness at both and having that versatility while being the best, like one of the best players in the NFL is phenomenal, man. So
Absolutely. And then, well, Vince Wilfork at nose tackle. To be honest, there's not other than names that you could go out there. You could almost argue you could put Kevin Williams there. Hello Donata, like a lot of guys.
Lawrence, the
Dexter
new
Lawrence,
age.
yeah. It's just funny because that's the thing. It's like the nose tackle position has kind of gone away. Because even like, I mean, Vita Vea is probably one of the most closest things today. But even then, defensive schemes just don't use guys that way. Like they're either a zero shade or one tech. But Vince Wilfork was absolutely dominant at being a true nose tackle. 5-time All-Pro.
Yeah, 5-time All-Pro, and he also has like some insane plays, like him dropping back in coverage, getting interceptions, which is just nuts, dude.
Rumbling and stumbling.
Yeah, exactly. At 360.
All right. Let's move a layer back to linebackers. This one has, I think, some debate in it for me personally.
Definitely has some debate, dude.
Yeah. Linebacker 1, non-debatable, I think, even though a good portion of his career wasn't. I mean, like 4 or 5 seasons worth. But Ray Lewis, linebacker 1.
Mm-hmm.
Linebacker 2, already in a weird way for me, is Bobby Wagner. Linebacker 3, Brian Urlacher. Linebacker 4, Levante David. And linebacker 5 is Luke Kuechly with practice squad of Derek Brooks.
Levante David's a great player. And all these guys are great players, like I've said them 1,000 times. However, how do you have an all-century 2000s team and you have 6 linebackers on the list and Patrick Willis is not one of them? That is one of the most disrespectful. You could argue Patrick Willis should be linebacker number 2 on the list. I would make a strong argument that Patrick Willis is peak. Patrick Willis came into the league as one of the best linebackers in the league and left the league as one of the best linebackers in the league. As far as guys comparable to what Aaron Donald did, and what I mean by that is entering the NFL, becoming one of the best players at your position in the NFL, and then leaving the NFL as one of the best at your position. That's exactly what Patrick Willis did. It's exactly what Aaron Donald did. And Patrick Willis he couldn't even make the practice squad. And I get Derek Brooks is there, but surely we can demote Levante David over for Patrick Willis, man. Patrick Willis to me is one of the biggest misses on the list.
I completely agree. And it's another guy that like had a very short stint. Like kind of had a shorter career than a lot of other guys, but was probably the best. The second Ray Lewis left.
Yes.
And even that last season in 2012 when they faced each other in the Super Bowl. And he's a Hall of Famer now as well. It is kind of crazy to me when we leave off just actual Hall of Famers from this list who played their entire career in this specific quarter century. Yeah, Levante, and it's again no disrespect to Levante, but it's another one of those things where like I do think he's getting propped up a bit by modern day discourse and people. Linebacker, I think, is another position people don't really watch or understand fully of what their role is. And the perfect example of that is Devin White. Like people thought Devin White was a really good linebacker. He just got signed for like a $2 million deal or whatever for the Raiders. I think they almost cut him already too. Like,
yeah,
people and Pro Bowl voting has played a role in that. And it's not to say Levante David's not really good because he is.
Oh, he is really good. And he will be a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, but like actual Hall of Famer Patrick Willis.
Exactly. And that's the thing. That's the thing to me because there was no point during so Levante David and Luke Kuechly entered the NFL at the same time. Was there ever a point where you felt like Luke Kuechly was worse than Levante David? The answer to me is a resounding no. Luke Kuechly was clearly the better player out of those two players. So right away, I'm like, okay, Levante David really was never even the best at his position. Patrick Willis, that is not the case for. Like, it was a debate between him and Ray Lewis, and then Ray Lewis, towards the end of his career, wasn't even the same player as he once was. Patrick Willis was literally entered the league as one of the best players at his position, if not the best, and left it like that. That's unbelievable. And again, I compare it to Aaron Donald because they're two of the only guys on this list that you can say that about, that entered the league at the peak and left the league at the peak. And had, obviously Willis's career wasn't that long, but it was definitely long enough. Other than that, I think the names are right. Like, I think these are the right names. I have heard some talk that Brian Urlacher is a little bit overrated, and I could kind of see that. But I will say he should probably make the list. For me, if I was making this list, he probably would make it. Bobby Wagner is getting a lot of love, and I understand that. Dude, 11-time All-Pro. I will say with linebackers, All-Pros to me mean a little bit less because they get more allocated to them. So like more like inside linebackers make it than like edge rushers. So they're not more, but there's 3 inside linebackers that make it, and there's not even 3 inside linebackers on the field at a given time. So that's
anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Ever. There's never 3 off the ball linebackers on the field at the same time. So that's kind of absurd that 3 get all pro nods. So that's boosted up a little bit, but 11 all pros is quite a bit.
Yeah. And I mean, but for Brian Urlacher's thing, he's the only other guy on this list besides, Luke Kuechly, Ray Lewis, and him are the 3 that have defensive player of the years, which I think is worth noting. Derek Brooks is interesting because there's another guy I want to throw out there too that I think is an interesting topic, but both of them are one of those drafted mid to late 90s guys. Derek Brooks suffers from that, of being drafted in the 90s. And then another guy is Zach Thomas, who was drafted in 96. And I think you bump that back, it's kind of hard not to include a guy like him and Derek Brooks on this list.
True, but it also speaks to the greatness of Ray Lewis because he was also drafted in 96. And
True.
He's the slam dunk LB1 for this team.
True.
Ray Lewis is probably the greatest off the ball linebacker of all time. It's obvious. How he ended his career was unbelievable. Going on that Super Bowl run at his old age and actually being a legit contributor to that team. Unreal. Again, I won't. The names are probably right. My only problem is you can't have Levante David on this list over Patrick Willis, especially when I think Patrick Willis and Luke Kuechly would be who I debate for linebacker number 2 on this team. Bobby Wagner would probably be in that debate, but Luke Kuechly and Patrick Willis's peak were unbelievable. And it's not throwing shade at Bobby Wagner because, again, I think he needs to be on the list and he's one of the best linebackers of the century. But I'm just trying to speak to how good Willis and Luke Kuechly were.
Yeah, and another name I want to throw out, as just because a lot of people probably do know the name because he was still really good in the 2000s, but was shockingly drafted early 90s, is Junior Seau. He had still a solid career in the 2000s, but he was drafted well early into the 90s. But a guy I'm going to throw out as just an underrated guy in NFL history, in my opinion, is London Fletcher.
Oh, yeah.
London Fletcher gets disrespected quite a bit as a linebacker. And you compare some of his stats to even Ray Lewis at different points in their career. And I know stats don't say everything, but I think he's just a guy that's been a little disrespected throughout his career and post-career now.
That's very true. There's a couple guys. See, I think the names are right, but there's probably 10 guys that are deserving, but it's an all-century team. It's like it's tough to get them in. Lance Briggs for the Bears.
Lance Briggs, yeah.
You could argue he was better than Brian Urlacher at some points. So that's a guy I'll throw out. So just a lot of good middle linebackers. But my biggest problem with the list, outside of AP not being on it, is Patrick Willis being left out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think otherwise it's a solid group, without a doubt. And it was probably a relatively easier one in general as well, because a lot of the guys I said, like, I'm not putting them on here over these guys.
It's just in the debate.
It is, yeah. And then the ordering of them, I think you could argue a bit here as well. But all right, let's move on to the secondary. So
Let's
this
go.
one, this one has at least 1 to 2 spots. I think we're going to have some very interesting debate. Um, so CB1 is Darrell Revis, Revis Island.
Of course.
CB2 is Champ Bailey. CB3 is Rondé Barber. CB4 is Richard Sherman. And then CB5 is Patrick Peterson. And practice squad Jalen Ramsey.
So they got this one wrong. I'll just come out and say it. They got it wrong. First of all, CB1 and 2 are obvious, so they don't get credit for naming the obvious, right? We're talking about 2 of the greatest corners of all time, and Darrell Revis and Champ Bailey. I was telling you before we got on air, Dakota, that I believe Darrell Revis' 2009 season might be the greatest season in NFL history. Regardless of position, that's just how good that 2009 season was. What he was doing, he was literally following the number 1 wide receiver every snap of the game, whether they moved him into the slot or not. There's literally never been a cornerback in NFL history to do that, and he shut them all down that season. Hall of Famer after Hall of Famer. Unbelievable what Revis did in 2009. And Champ Bailey, a guy that was kind of underrated for a while, in my opinion, but people have kind of come back around to how good Champ Bailey was. He definitely needs to be number 2. And then from there, I think it's a little debatable, man. First of all, a guy who made the team technically, Charles Woodson, probably should be on here as a cornerback. He did most of his damage at corner, and to me, he would easily start. He would be CB3 for me on this team.
Yeah, so to that point, he is listed as practice squad for the safeties, which is wild. But yeah, to not have him starting on this team is insane to me.
It's crazy.
Personally, it's up there. I think that and AP, like in the LT, like this is one of the more disrespectful ones here. Like again, one of the best to ever do it, Hall of Famer Charles Woodson doesn't start on this team is crazy to me.
And Patrick Peterson is.
And Patrick Peterson is, and that is like
that's crazy.
Man, he to me, his peak was a peak of like 2 to 3 seasons. We were like, oh, he's a really good corner, and then it was just kind of like, Patrick Peterson is there.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, man. That one is wild to me.
It's pretty wild. I agree.
And then Jalen Ramsey making the practice squad's a little bit interesting. You know, he's drafted in what 17?
No, actually,
15. Or was it 15?
I think it might be 16.
16, yeah. I was like, was he with Corey Coleman? I think he was. So 16. Yeah. Yes. That's how I figured out. When was Corey Coleman a bust? That's when Jalen Ramsey was drafted. Oh, yeah, because they got Lenny. Okay, yeah. But, yeah, Jalen Ramsey's an interesting one on there because it's like, to be honest, what I think this list has made me realize is the drop-off we've had at cornerback play in the NFL. Yeah, because even now, like, I mean, Pat Surtain is really good. Sauce has kind of fallen off. Like, none of these guys, in my opinion, are even at the level of like what Richard Sherman was doing at his peak right now. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it seems like there's a clear drop off, and that's why it's a lot of these guys are guys who played a lot, earlier in the 2000s. But yeah, not having Charles Woodson start at corner.
It's wild.
He played safety at the end when he got a little bit older and couldn't move quite as well. But
he was good.
Was an elite cornerback. He was
still
good.
Yeah, he was good at safety. So I'm not even trying to take away from that. But he did most of his damage at cornerback and was elite. He was an elite cornerback for years. So that's absurd. He would be my CB number 3 on this team. I will say it's just hard to have a long peak at corner, man. It's just not a position it's a very hard position, dude. It's incredibly hard to be good year in and year out. Kind of speaks to the greatness of Champ Bailey, 7-time All-Pro. That's unbelievable. Champ Bailey is one of the all-time greats. And, Rondé Barber is good, but again, a guy who's kind of, he did play a long time, which I'm surprised to see that he retired in 2012. That's unbelievable to me. I did not realize he played that long, but drafted in the mid 90s and 97. So a guy that's kind of debatable whether he should be on the list or not. even though he's an all-time great. But yeah, my biggest problem is Patrick Peterson. Like, I would definitely demote Patrick Peterson for Charles Woodson at corner. Sherman definitely deserves to be on the list.
Yeah.
Sherman kind of changed the NFL. Like, he was the prototype for that Seattle defense that just kind of changed the league. So he definitely deserves to be on this list. Have no issue with that. And again, Patrick Peterson's a guy that in the current state of the Hall of Fame, which not getting too far into the Hall of Fame discussion, he should probably be in the current state of the Hall of Fame. In mine and Dakota's Hall of Fame, he wouldn't make it. But in the current state of the Hall of Fame, he would. But dude, like Patrick Peterson over Charles Woodson at corner, which again is, I mean, this would help the team. Like if you take Charles Woodson off your practice squad at safety, where he's going to contribute nothing, and put him in the cornerback depth chart, he's obviously going to help the team in that way. So that was just a miss.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, and to your point too, because it's like, to be honest, like even with Darrelle Revis, he had a really, really intense peak, but the longevity is difficult to do. That's where I think Champ and Charles Woodson deserve the most credit, is because I think they did it for the longest time of any of these guys, to be honest. And then honestly, Sherman had a pretty strong one, but even then, it's like it is tough to put together great seasons. And honestly, one of the things that could play into the fact that today's cornerback just state seems worse is because these guys were like born into a passing league where you're just being asked to do more down to down. So it's going to be tougher. Like Sauce is the perfect example where you go from being like looking like one of the elite guys to a season that looks off, and it's just because the variance at cornerback is so high.
I will say with Woodson, they could have done a JJ Watt-esque position for him.
True.
That's how versatile he was. He played outside corner most of his career. He played a lot in the slot. He also played safety. He could have literally just been
They don't have a nickel spot. Yeah.
They could have literally just made him a nickel. Like they could have given him a nickel starting position. And they probably should have. I think that was again one of the bigger misses.
Yeah, I agree with that. One guy I'm going to throw out. I like thinking of guys that like were on the brink and why they're not, because this guy's a Hall of Famer. But Ty Law was drafted in '95, so just like again, anybody drafted unless you're like Ray Lewis, exactly. You're just too much in the '90s. Unless you're Ray Lewis, it's just too much in the '90s to be able to make it in. But he was drafted in '95. Had he been drafted in like '98 or later, he's definitely over Pat P.
That Patriots, those early Patriots teams, man, they're getting an awful lot of guys in this conversation.
It's almost like that defense helped carry them to some Super Bowls, but
maybe, man.
Maybe
some people would argue.
All right. Some people would. We don't do those things here though, but we don't make takes like that. But all right. Now we go to the safeties. A little bit less debate here, except for one guy.
Yeah.
Safety number 1, Ed Reed. Safety number 2, Troy Polamalu. Safety 3, Brian Dawkins. And he gets the Ray Lewis effect of being a 96 guy that makes this. And then Earl Thomas as safety 4 with Charles Woodson on the practice squad behind him.
It's tough because Earl Thomas, again, is more of a Pete guy. He's part of that, that Seattle defense that, again, changed the league, and he was kind of the prototype safety for that defense. So I understand why he's on the list, but his peak, he's really carried by his peak because he did fall off pretty hard and pretty quickly. I'll start with the top of the where I'll go to the top of the list now. Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu, total slam dunk, obvious. These are 2 of the best players at their positions ever. 2 of the funnest players to watch in NFL history. Some of the I'm literally getting goosebumps thinking about some of the plays that these 2 guys made. Ed Reed is, to me, the greatest safety to ever play the game. Like, some of his plays, man, the amount of field that Ed Reed could cover. And by the way, again, kind of going with the theme I've been going here with, which is making the best team. Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu, are you kidding me? That would be the best safety tandem ever, obviously. But because their skill sets fit each other so well. You have Ed Reed, in the secondary, basically covering the entire field by himself. And then you have Troy Polamalu in the box doing what he's doing. Go ahead. He would be the tush push dominator like that's the tush push stopper that's missing in the league is Troy Polamalu, by the way. So that they
God,
nailed the
that's so
first
true.
two, obviously.
Yeah, without a doubt. Like those are the ones that it's like you can't debate. And then Brian Dawkins probably becomes more of that conversation. Had more of his career been in the 2000s. Um, but yeah, I mean, Ed Reed is probably. It's crazy that the freaking Ravens, from basically their existence almost, because yeah, basically literally their existence with Ray Lewis being drafted in '96. Like they had the best safety, like argue the best safety and the best linebacker ever on the same team together, which is just freaking insane.
It
But
is.
yeah, and then Polamalu is just one of the more unique guys to have ever come through the league and the way he played. Because he had a few. There was one against. It's kind of like the tush push thing that happened with the Commanders, where they kept trying to do that. Um, but I remember one against the Titans. I think it was even on like a Monday night or Thursday night game where he did it like 2 times in a row, like stuffed us on it, timed it
It's just
perfectly, and absolutely embarrassed us. Um, and then one thing I just want to go back and shout because I completely forgot to do this with Richard Sherman. Because to your point with like the difference in game stuff is that he was really the first corner who was this like 6'2", 6'3" frame
yep.
that was just not normal. Like you needed to be small to stay with receivers, and as athleticism has changed, and guys like Reek Woolen now, funnily enough, even Quinion, like guys who are a little bit longer, and Sauce has a little bit of length to him too, could play corner, and he proved that.
And
So I just
everybody
want to
was
make sure I
chasing
shout him
that
out.
after Sherman, man. Everybody was
Oh
chasing
yeah,
that in that system. Everybody wanted that big, tall corner, like Sherman. So yeah, dude, he changed the league in that way. That's why he definitely deserved to be on there. Um, but yeah, I think the safety list overall, again, it's like Charles Woodson wouldn't be a safety to me because he would move to corner. A guy that we have to shout, obviously a little bias in this, but Eric Berry. Eric Berry was
yeah.
phenomenal, dude. One of the best peaks in I wouldn't say, well, I won't go as far as say NFL history, but definitely in this century. One of the best peaks. 5-time All Pro. I mean, 5-time All Pro. That's as much as
Three-time
Earl Thomas.
first team as well.
3-time first team All Pro, exactly. So yeah, a guy that definitely deserves to be in the conversation. Eric Berry was phenomenal, so have to shout him out.
I mean, and I'm not trying to disrespect Earl Thomas. We have some bias, but like uh, Earl just wouldn't be. It's tough, man. He just I wouldn't. I would have Eric Berry over him. I would. I think his peak is better than what Earl's was. But then two guys that I think are worth mentioning from because again we've not had this hasn't been a great safety era. Um,
No, man, especially compared to compared to that Troy Polamalu, Ed Reed, and then you had guys like Earl
yeah,
Thomas and Eric Berry. Yeah, it's not been great
yeah.
compared to that.
Yeah, I mean, it just hasn't been. But two guys, one guy, I'll shout out one first for people that, again, everybody who missed the cut. Rodney Harrison was drafted in 94. So again, just too much time. He had a good career in the 2000s, but just not enough time to make the list. But two guys I'll shout out. I don't think I would start them over any of these guys, but just worth noting who'd probably be on the depth chart are Cam Chancellor. Because if we're talking about skill set stuff, like Earl's more of the free. Dude, imagine a defense where you have guys Ed Reed, Brian Dawkins, and Cam Chancellor. If you just kill every receiver on the other team, you win. So that would be an interesting one. And then another guy I would throw out that is probably a little underrated for our era is Eric Weddle.
Yeah, Eric Weddle. How about Dante Whitner? How about him, man?
Dante Hittner.
Yeah, exactly, brother. Exactly. Another guy kind of like Chancellor. But Eric Weddle is a solid shout. I think they mentioned Eric Weddle in the write-up. Maybe they didn't. But to me, I'm taking Eric Berry over Eric Weddle personally. But yeah, again, I think this is a position. And Brian Dawkins, I haven't touched on him a lot. I get why he's on here, right? He's one of the best safeties ever. Another guy, dude, which I will say, Sam Monson brought this up on Check the Mic. Darren Sharper, a guy who people don't want to mention, because of post career, but dude, he was nuts for those Saints defenses, dude. That especially that 2019, Darren Sharper was the man. Unfortunately, not a great human being, but he was the man, dude.
Yeah, if we're talking football talent, yeah, it's hard to argue the way how he was, especially with those Saints. Bounty Scandaling, man, when they were out there just literally killing people for money.
Yeah.
But it got him a Super Bowl. It worked.
Yeah, and we won't talk about him post career because that's kind of why he probably
Yeah.
is not in this conversation.
Yeah. People probably afraid to mention. We may get banned from YouTube now.
Possibly.
But yeah, safeties otherwise, yeah. I mean, Eric Berry, I think, would be the fourth for me. But other than that, I mean, wasn't bad. And now into the least exciting portion. We do have special teamers. We got them.
When I saw that you gave me this graphic, I was floored. I thought we were just going to skip right over the special teamers.
Dude, I was literally cooked it up like right before we did. It was the last thing I did. I was like, man, I kind of forgot about them. I guess I'll do it. We got Justin Tucker at kicker. Kind of debatable in my opinion. I think recency bias dominates him a little bit, but Shane Leckler at punter. I think that's fine. And then, God, man, the debate will happen as we get into this. Return specialist of Devin Hester, perfectly fine. Special teamer of Matthew Slater, and then long snapper, Titans legend currently, Morgan Cox.
It's funny that we're talking about special teams because I'm just thinking about this team in action and how some of these players would have to play special teams. Like you'd have like Julio Jones being a gunner, which is just nuts to think about. Which honestly, with his athleticism, would have probably been a better gunner than Matthew Slater. Here's my thing with this. I don't have many takes on the special teams. I think obviously you debate Vinatieri and Justin Tucker.
Vinatieri, yeah.
That's definitely a debate. The punter, I have no problem with, like, whatever. To me, it should be over whoever averaged the most yards in the punts. I will say Pat McAfee, maybe. He had a really good peak as a punter. Devin Hester, have no issues with. The Matthew Slater thing, because we were talking about, like, just building a roster. I'll say this about Matthew Slater. Are we sure he was that good at special teams? Like, to me, I feel like he got that reputation. And then every year for like all pro and the Pro Bowl, people are like, oh, well, Matthew Slater, obviously. It's like if you get that reputation 1 year, then you're just gonna have that for like 10 years. And I feel like that might have been the case with Slater.
I want people to tell me, have they been grinding Matthew Slater tape?
Yeah,
have you been grinding punt team tape?
Yeah.
Because you haven't. And that's my biggest quarrel with this is like the idea of wasting, because like I know the idea was building a roster, but if you're going to do something that like people will be a part of, it's kind of crazy to me that you even waste a spot there. Because my argument would be a punt returner and a kick returner, because Devin Hester is the best punt returner ever. The best kick, and practice squad did have CPAT, Cordero Patterson, but he needs to be on the team for kick returning. You know what I mean? Like that's a way more valuable thing.
Oh yeah,
and because your point, like. Yeah, we could Julio as a gunner, and then our kickoff team is just going to be Brian Dawkins and Troy Polamalu, them screaming downfield. Like, I don't need Matthew Slater out there.
It's so funny. Like, it is funny to think about because, like, special teams, whatever, is it that important? Coaches will tell you yes, but at the end of the day, it's like, can it impact some games? Yes. For the most part, it's not that impactful. But imagine a special teams with all these great athletes, dude. Like you truly would have the greatest special teams ever with just all these insane athletes. Because really, when it comes down to roster building, at like when you're trying to fill out the roster and you're trying to fill in those special teams guys, you are just looking for kind of the athletes to fill in that can maybe play a position, but they're mostly going to be special teams guys. But yeah, I agree with you. I think I probably would have put a kick returner on there instead of Matthew Slater because, again, like how much impact that guy going to have? Or Morgan Cox. Like, dude, we don't need you, Morgan Cox. We'll just have somebody like one of our backup guards do the long snap.
Jari Evans can do it.
Yeah, Jari Evans, you're going to be our long snapper. Congratulations, buddy. Like Morgan Cox.
Yeah, it's like Madden.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like Madden. Like you always, the first thing you do in franchise mode on Madden, you cut your long snapper. You cut your long snapper and you make your, backup left guard do it or whatever. I would not waste a 50-man or a 53-man spot on Morgan Cox on this team.
Yeah, and I don't want to just spend my time hating on these guys and whatnot in their careers, but it's just, I mean, if you put literally any starting offensive or defensive player out there for Matthew Slater's job, and then the same thing for snapping, like it's important, but like most centers can do that. Anybody can, to be honest. Not anybody.
Anybody can. Me and you are gonna lace it up and go be a long snapper.
I practice it a little bit. Give me some time to practice it, and I'll go play. But the Matthew Slater one kills me because it's not even like a real position either, and we took it away from like the greatest kick returner of our generation.
It's fair.
And then my only other thing I will say is on the Justin Tucker front, recency bias a bit. I know he had all the 50+ stats and percentage, kind of falling off a cliff now. Other reasons as well, but just his last 2 seasons have been pretty rough. But I mean, if you were to tell me right now, I need a guy to kick a game-winning field goal for me, and you're picking between Vinatieri and him, I'm sorry, but I'm probably picking Vinatieri. The dude's clutchness and what he did in his career is kind of unmatched.
In the biggest
and then
moments.
Seabass deserves the shout as well. Like Sebastian Janikowski was also probably the best lefty kicker ever. So
yeah, I mean I kind of agree. Like if you want one guy for one kick, I think people are probably looking at like Tucker's leg. Like Justin Tucker had a huge leg and the accuracy. Adam Vinatieri really didn't have the leg that Tucker had. But if we're talking about clutch moments, like if you just need one 40-yard field goal, I think we're all taking Adam Vinatieri. He also played a little bit in the 90s, so that might have been part of that.
It did. Probably, yeah.
So, but yeah, special teams, those guys matter too.
Cool. All right. And then they did do coaching staff, so we'll touch on that
Which
really
I
quick.
like.
Yeah, so head coach, Bill Belichick, no surprise there. Offensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan. And then defensive coordinator, Wade Phillips. And then they did have a special teams coordinator. I'm sorry, we are big NFL fans, but I don't pay attention. All I know is our special teams coordinator was the guy from the Colts that had the worst play ever. That dude was our special teams coordinator last year and was the reason ours was terrible. But Dave Tube was the guy they picked for that.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't know who Dave Tube is. I'm going to be completely real with you. And maybe that makes me a casual. But the coach list is interesting because I'm curious if they, like, the criteria was you had to be, like, to be a coordinator, you had to do a lot of your main work as a coordinator, or if it was one of those situations. Because, like, Kyle Shanahan, a little bit of both, right? Like, really good OC, great head coach. So, like, can you just put a head coach as a coordinator? Because if you can do that, then maybe you rearrange this, have Andy Reid as the head coach and Bill Belichick as the DC, something like that. Wade Phillips' DC was very interesting to me. I mean, I'm not going to argue with it. He definitely coached some great defenses. And again, that kind of, maybe that answers my question. Maybe that is like, because Wade Phillips was a head coach, but not a successful head coach. So maybe it was a situation where they were trying to make the coordinators like legitimate coordinators in the 2000s, because let's keep in mind, Andy Reid would have been the offensive coordinator, but his offensive coordinator days were before the 2000s. So.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing. I think the coaching was bizarre in the way they did it because the criteria for what it says is that we're allowed as long as they criteria for coordinators were that head coaches were allowed as long as they spent some time as a coordinator this quarter century, and they don't specify the time frame.
So Andy
the
Reid
guy that immediately
count.
Yeah, so the guy that immediately comes to mind to me, though, that I'm kind of shocked wouldn't get this over Kyle Shanahan is Sean Payton.
Oh, Sean Payton. Okay.
Sean Payton was the OC for the Giants for 2000 to 2002. So that's an interesting one that I'm surprised. And then, to be honest, like other guys I would throw out there, this one's probably a crazy, not that bad, but like Josh McDaniels was honestly pretty phenomenal as an offensive coordinator, atrocious head coach, but really good as an offensive coordinator. I don't have I'm fine with Kyle Shanahan. DC bothers me more than OC.
Yeah, the DC is interesting. I just don't know who would have been a better option at DC. Like, I just threw out Mike Tomlin's name. Maybe Mike Tomlin's a guy, but again, a guy who
his DC is who I would have probably picked for a while is Dick LeBeau.
Oh yeah,
Dick LeBeau, I would have probably taken over Wade Phillips.
That is fair. He coached some absolutely phenomenal Steelers defenses. So yeah, that's probably a good shout.
And then interesting guys would be like Steve Spagnuolo or Vic Fangio.
Yeah. Spags is definitely a guy that you have to
Spags
debate.
especially,
yeah. Also, maybe we're not ready to have this conversation, but would you just take Andy Reid over Bill Belichick? Like honestly,
Ooh.
would you take Andy Reid? Because listen, like the debate, Bill Belichick didn't look great the post Brady debate, right? Like we're gonna have that debate. I remember when it happened, like when Brady left the Patriots, like, okay, who's gonna miss who more? It was clearly Bill missing Brady more. That was obvious. And and that was not to me and Dakota's delight, by the way. We were kind of hoping for the opposite impact. But dude, Andy Reid has done it with so many different quarterbacks. Donovan McNabb, Michael Vick, Alex Smith, Patrick Mahomes, all very different skill sets, dude. All incredibly different skill sets, and has won with every single one of those quarterbacks. Took Donovan McNabb to 5 NFC championship games, completely revitalized Michael Vick's career after prison. Alex Smith honestly saved his career as well, even though he ended on a high note with the Niners. It was still like one of those things where it's like, okay, how many more years does Alex Smith have as a starter? He won many divisional titles with Alex Smith, and of course what he did with Mahomes. And yeah, Mahomes got him over the top, but I mean those other three guys, none of those guys are even close to Hall of Famers, Dakota. I mean those are not guys that you would even are even going to come close to the Hall of Fame, and he was taking them to insane team success with those guys.
Yeah. Before I jump into that, I have breaking news here. Chaz Lanier just got drafted by the Pistons.
Oh, let's go. Good for you,
It's
Chaz.
unfortunate for his career, but good for him getting drafted.
Good for you, Chaz.
But no, it is a really interesting one too, because there's also the pre-Patriot data you have with Bill Belichick as well, where he did bring the Browns to the playoffs, but it was also a very bumpy ride. And there's a reason he was jumped around and ended up in New England and was a very good DC with them originally, with Cleveland and back in the day before getting a head coaching job and then the short
Giants.
stint elsewhere. Yeah. But yeah, I think it is a very interesting debate because, to be honest, I don't know if there will ever be in sports really a symbiotic relationship like Belichick and Brady. Where like if you take Brady and put him elsewhere, what is he? We saw him win a Super Bowl, but like after he became Tom Brady, like if you didn't have that situation for him in the beginning, not to say his career is bad, but like it's an interesting debate. And then the same thing with Belichick. If he doesn't have Brady, what happens to him? I just think that those two were just the perfect fusion for creating this dynasty. But to your point with Andy Reid, yeah, it is that is an interesting debate because what he has accomplished with multiple quarterbacks consistently being a division winning football team.
Yep.
And to your point with Alex Smith, like, I mean, they told him get lost with Colin Kaepernick came in and they were like, we drafted you in the first, you were literally the top pick in 2005, but we got this other guy now.
And we just went to an NFC championship with you, by the way.
Yep.
Coming off an NFC championship performance or appearance. Yeah, I mean, listen, and let's not forget, and this is a quarter century team, so we're talking about the 2000s here, but he took Brett Favre to a Super Bowl as the OC. Like this is Andy Reid has been successful in the NFL for a very long time, even before being a head coach. So yeah, I think that debate it's a healthy one, man. Andy Reid versus Bill Belichick. And the Belichick Brady thing, that's something that we'll probably get into a more deep dive in at some point, but it is incredibly nuanced because, you know, Bill Belichick is still the greatest defensive head coach of all time. There's no question about that. It's to me for this team, the question would be like, because obviously you're trying to build the best team humanly possible. Are you going to sign up for the Belichick, you know, way and like that culture that he's putting together? I don't think this team in particular would be very good for that because Bill Belichick didn't really manage stars well. Like Brady was a good fit for him because like Brady wasn't like a diva or whatever. But outside of Brady, like Bill Belichick would have rather have had like, you know, a roster of 53 average players that he can, you know, elevate than 53 stars. I think Andy Reid would possibly lead this team in a better direction. Possibly.
So I honestly, that's a really good point. I agree with it. And here is what was probably the difficult part for them is that the last year Belichick was a DC was 1999. So had he just had one season in 2000 as a DC before he got the head coaching
Yeah,
job
because you have to have
with the
Belichick
Patriots.
on the team.
Exactly, but
He
like
won
that
6
is
Super
also
Bowls.
probably the most insane fucking coach. Like that's the most insane coaching group in like NFL history if you were to have that. But like, it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that he got hired as the Patriots coach in 2000 because it would have solved their problem pretty easily. Because then you've got Reed at head coach, Shanahan at OC, and
Yep.
Belichick at DC.
It would have been nuts, dude. And that probably would have been the right answer because Kyle Shanahan. People early, I'll just talk about Shanahan for a second. So early in like the beginning of the Shanahan offense and whatever, to me, Sean McVay was getting more credit than anyone with all that. Like, especially as a head coach, like Sean McVay obviously took the Rams to the Super Bowl in 2018. I think Sean McVay came onto the scene as far as like casual NFL fans are concerned before Kyle Shanahan did. Well, Kyle Shanahan was the leader of that whole thing. Like Kyle Shanahan was on that Washington Redskins roster, was the offensive coordinator while Sean McVay was on. I forget what McVay was at the time, but maybe quarterbacks coach or something. He was not. He was below Shanahan. So Sean McVay comes from Kyle Shanahan's tree. And then that's how you get, this, which basically has taken over the NFL, by the way, between Shanahan and Sean McVay. They have completely taken over the NFL as far as head coaches are concerned. So Kyle Shanahan is pretty underrated, I would say, like, from like a shouty show perspective. People would just say, "Oh, he's choked in the big moments, 28-3." The Chiefs Super Bowl when they're up by 10 or whatever. When he was head coach at the Niners, so it's like, yeah, but he's an offensive mastermind, man, and has changed the NFL, and continues to change it, and his footprint's all over the league.
Yeah, and to touch on that too, like that that Redskins coaching staff, it was like 2012, I think, was before it fell apart. Like he had him on that as the OC. He had Sean McVay under him. He had Matt LaFleur under him. Mike McDaniel was a part of that. Like it's crazy, and also guys that have come from it are like Bobby Slowick, Arthur Smith. Kevin Stefanski loosely comes from that tree, and then Sean McVay's tree below him now has Kevin O'Connell from it, Liam Cohen, and Zach Taylor. Like, it's crazy what Shanahan as the original thing kind of spread this massive tree out from.
It's unreal, man. I mean, like I said, it's completely taken over the NFL. Like everyone wants somebody from that mindset, that coaching tree. So I totally get why Kyle Shanahan is the OC on this team.
All right. Well, that wraps up the ESPN all quarter century team. They got some stuff right, got a lot of stuff we disagree with, but overall it was a really cool idea. I'm glad they did it. Giving us some off-season content like that is always nice. It was fun breaking it down.
It was.
So since we touched on it so much during this, I think there's a solid chance that next week we will start our Hall of Fame discussions because we've kind of opened the door to now just go full. Let's just talk about the Hall of Fame. I think that'll be a really good discussion. So tune in next week for that. 7 Eastern Thursdays. I will maybe be in Raleigh again in a few weeks on like the 17th. So just shouting that out now for our loyal listeners to note that we may have a rough day that day. We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see. Hopefully I can make it work. We'll see if we're driving back that night. But appreciate everybody that tuned in live and those that watched. Appreciate all the support. Please like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Let us know in the comments what you think. Because again, people that didn't see this, you probably got to hear from it for the first time from us. But even if you did, would love to see your all's thoughts on it, where you would change, who you'd put where, who you'd cut immediately, or who you would add as a special teamer. We want to know.
And why would you cut Priest Holmes first?
Yeah, break down all the guys you would put over Priest Holmes.
Yeah, exactly. Just how many guys would make this team over Priest Holmes?
Oh, it was a lot of fun. Well, appreciated everybody. But until next time.
Thanks for talking ball with us.